All right, well, it's 9 o'clock. If you guys want to go ahead and get started, does everybody have a copy of this? I think you know there's, looks like everyone has one. Okay. So today we are going to be going over the beginning of the year balance scorecard. I think you might remember that we went over how we developed this scorecard in a previous meeting. So this is essentially how we monitor our continuous strategic improvement plan, or our CSIP. And so you may recall that we have a part that looks at our finances, we have a part that looks at our academics, and we have a part that looks at climate, and then we also have a part of that scorecard that looks at employees. So that's kind of where it gets that name, balanced scorecard. Because we need all of those systems operating together to support our ultimate goal, or our ultimate core competency, which is teaching and learning. And so we're doing the beginning of the year scorecard because we monitor this as the year goes on. So we don't wait to the end of the year to find out, well, that didn't go very well, or that went really well, or isn't that a surprise? So really we don't, and you'll notice right now we don't have all of the data because it is still, mid-October. So as data comes in, for example, at the middle of the year, we'll have more data to show you. So this is really what we have right now. And so we'll go over what we do have and then see if you have any questions about that. So one of the first metrics that we have when we look at financial responsibility and integrity, that line number 1 is responsible with tax dollars. That will appear in the next balance scorecard in the middle of the year, because that survey is going out next week. And so that's going to community and parents. And so we asked them about their perception of the St. Joe School District's responsibility with tax dollars. So you will have that in that middle of the year column that you see when we do this again in January. We'll do this again.
So on that scorecard, the only way we gauge that is by what the community thinks? Or?
No, but this is just the scorecard is like a snapshot of that particular piece. But for example, in Katie's department improvement plan, all of the financial components, including audits and things like that, are in her department improvement plan as part of the CSIP. But these are just 2 metrics that we put on the scorecard for a 1-page look at how are we doing, what's the community perception, and what's one of the most important metrics is the next one that we have on there, and Katie can talk to you a little bit about this one. It's called expenditure to budget index. So Katie, do you want to kind of talk to them about what that 28 means?
Sure. So we have a metric that we use first quarter, second quarter, third, and fourth quarter, and it just takes total budget, and then we have Fund 1 and Fund 2, so those are our operating funds. And then we take, for revenue, we're going to do state revenue and federal revenue. I think we could provide it if you guys wanted to see that. It's all, written out and everything. And we just take the first 3 months of the first quarter and then see where we're at in a comparison to the total budget, and then have point values assigned to those metrics that we had set up, and that's how the target is 32. And so I think there was a couple areas where we didn't actually quite spend enough to be where we had originally set our goals at, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for expenditures. But it's pretty good, 28 out of 32 for the first quarter. I mean, we also are getting now into the swing of things where we're spending more money and then getting more money in from those revenue sources.
So the target 32 is for the whole year?
Yes.
And where are
well,
we at?
I'm sorry, it's for each quarter.
For each quarter?
Yes,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, so, and then, so those are really our two snapshots we look at in terms of finances and key indicators. So it's not every indicator, but it's some of our key indicators. So then we kind of move on when you see line, that item 3, we kind of go into academics. And you can see there's a lot there. But right now, we only know so many of those things. So for example, you'll see in line number 3, the communication arts iReady proficiency. And right now, beginning of the year, we're sitting at a predicted proficiency of 35%. And so that would mean 35% of the kids right now are proficient when we look at that particular data. Now, does that mean that that's where that's going to stop? No. So it's just beginning of the year. So you can see, for example, if you go over to either red or yellow or our goal, which would be 7, or any of the blue areas, which are our stretch or target areas, it is in the red, but again, we're at the beginning of the year. Does that make sense to everybody? Because if you remember, these are all proficiencies from our comparison districts at the end of the year. So, but nonetheless, we still track it because we want to see that thing keep moving. And then in terms of growth, we don't have a growth score yet because we only took the beginning of the year test, so we won't know how much we grew until we take the middle of the year test. So that's why that's blank.
And what is that? What is the middle of the year test?
It will be, that gets deployed in right at the end of, right before break, so December. So then we'll know, that's why when we meet again, we'll meet in January, so you'll have that data at that time.
Okay.
And then if you look at the next piece, line number 7, where it says Com Art Student Group Gap. So that's 8.9. So when we look at a gap, what we're looking at is we're looking at all of our students, and then we look at that compared to a subset of our students that are in what the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education calls student groups. So that would be our Black students, our Hispanic students, our students that have an IEP, and all of those different subgroups that we look at. So that they wrap that into one big pile, and they call that a student growth group. So we look at what's the gap between how all of the kids are performing and then those kids are performing. So right now we have a gap of 8.9 in that particular area. So we want that number to continue to shrink as we continue throughout the school year, because we have lots of services, whether it's our ELL students or whether it's our IEP students or whether it is, any particular group that may be struggling, that's a student that's under-resourced, for example. So that number we like to continue to see go down, but when we look at our comparison sets, we're moderate even for the beginning of the year in terms of the gaps we see in other school districts. So that's promising when we look just at the beginning of the year. Now what we also do is on line number 8, we look at the reading level for our 3rd graders, and we look at their average scale score, because that's the number they get when they take this particular test. And so we just take all of the 3rd graders in the district and we get an average scale score. So when we look at what that average scale score is, right now it's 478. And so you can see that we're in the red there at 511. 511 is the number that would indicate that the 3rd grader was early on grade level. Well, we don't expect them necessarily to be a 511 right now because that's early on grade level. And if you remember our discussion from academic services, it's not a surprise when a 3rd grader comes in one grade level below because they're just starting third grade. And so 478 is not showing that they're early on grade level, but we're also not discouraged by that place where they're starting this year at a 478, because it's not too far of a stretch to a 511, if that makes sense.
And do we have a growth percentage on that too, or are we just gonna see?
We'll see, like for, in terms of a gap.
Right.
No, I don't have that number there. That's something I can give you though.
Okay.
But in the middle of the year, we'll see how much they grew, all of our third graders, from beginning of the year to middle of the year. We would not expect to continue to see a 5 or 478.
Okay, and that's in December.
Yes. Okay, so then we're moving on to math. So in terms of the current proficiency, that it would be 27%. So that is where we're sitting right now at the beginning of the year. And we went over some of that, I think, in the Academic Services Committee meeting, if you recall. Then, and again, it's beginning of the year. So we should see that continue to grow. Then on line number 10, it says math growth. Well, we don't have a metric there because we can't show growth if we haven't taken another diagnostic, and we will do that. On line 11, it says student group math proficiency. So again, that is showing how our students that are in a particular group are performing. And so that is 24.9%. So if you skip all the way down to line 13, that gap is 1.9. So that is a smaller gap than we're seeing in reading between our subgroups, is what they kind of call it, and then all of our students. So that is more towards the goal. Then if you look at our we also look at our 7th grade math. And we take all the 7th grade scores and we average them. So of course some kids are higher and some kids are a lot lower. But when we look at students coming into 7th grade being early on grade level, that number starts at a 489 and we're at a 480. So a little better than what we saw in 3rd grade. And I think we even discussed in the academic services meeting that we did see a little bit of a dip actually in 3rd grade. And we did see some of our students that in 3rd grade have been more impacted by the pandemic than some of our older kids. So we should see that 480 continue to go up. So then and then the rest of these, the science and the social studies, when DESE releases our MAP scores, and they said that they're going to do that in December, then we will have all of that to share with you guys as well. And so we'll have that populated for you at that time. Okay, so then our ACT composite this year, and this is just for our 12th graders. For our 12th graders that graduated last year, we were at a 20.1. And so that puts us right in kind of a moderate zone. We did see a bit of a decline in our ACT scores, and we would attribute that as well, a little bit of the impact from the pandemic. The state saw a little bit of a dip, but it wasn't a dramatic decline. But of course, we would have preferred to see an uptick. So, and we can talk more about that maybe in an academic services meeting. Then what you see for preparation for college and career, line 23, 24, and 25, that is all pending DESE releasing that information. So that is embargoed information, and so we don't have that to share with you, but we will be able to share that with you in December, as well as have an internal read on what our metrics are for this year. Because when DESE releases information in December, they're giving us information about last year. And so while helpful, it's not as particularly helpful in terms of guiding the current shift, if that makes any sense. So we'll be working on getting that data. Okay, so then we have the AP, that's advanced placement courses. And this is the percent of our students that scored 3 or above. When you score 3 or above on an AP course, by advanced placement or college board metrics, that means that you probably are likely to get at least a C in a college credit bearing course. So that's why we like to see those 3s, because those kids then can likely test out of those courses when they go to college. So that's very helpful to them. So we had 47% of our students score at least a 3 or above, and we had an increased participation rate last year as well. In fact, Central doubled the number of kids that actually were in AP courses, and at the same time maintained that 3 or above. So that is I think that's a very strong metric. Lafayette increased their AP course taking patterns, as did Benton. So that's a strong indicator for our high schools as well. Then when you go on focus on individual student needs, that's our Gallup poll data. So the Gallup poll was administered from October 6th to October 14th, so it just closed last Friday. And I was hoping to have it today to share with you, but Gallup has not sent it to me. So hopefully, as soon as they send that, I can send it to Dr. McGinnis, and she can either share it in a Friday update, or we can go over it in an academic services committee or something of that nature. But that's where those metrics come from, is our student Gallup poll. And we give that every year, and I think we've given it for probably since 2016. So we have a lot of data there. Then when you go down to student satisfaction, we have our attendance. And so you may be aware that we monitor that attendance, but it's called chronic absenteeism, and I know we've spent time talking about that. So for September, this is only for September, is that 80.3. Okay, so it's already the 19th of October, so pretty soon we'll have the metrics for October in terms of chronic absenteeism. So that, in terms of when you look at our comparison sets, that puts us, we just kind of have that range from 10 all the way to 100. And that will change once DESE updates all of our data. Then that 10 district comparison set, they'll all have to release their attendance rates, and we'll see where we fall with that, and how we're doing with regard to that. So again, the 80.3 is better than last year. We were at about a 74% when we started out, so we're 6% better than this time last year. Is it where we want to be? No, we don't want our kids to be missing that much school. We averaged that our high school kids had missed about 6 days since the start of school. That's a lot of school to miss. And the rest and overall, our kids have missed about 5 days each since school started. So that's, again, a lot of school to miss. Our elementaries and our middle schools improved roughly 8% over last year, and our high school really just stayed flat. So we're really going to be focusing on our high schools and how do we improve those attendance rates for our 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. So, and we saw really great improvements for our kindergarten, and so we were pleased with that as well. So there were good numbers, good indicators there, and some not good indicators there. Then if you look at the community satisfaction, that again is going to be part of the survey that we send out next week. So that will appear on the next balanced scorecard. And you may have the results before then, but it will also be in the balanced scorecard. We also have safe and orderly environment. So again, that line number 32 and line number 33, that comes from the student Gallup poll. And so like I mentioned earlier, we don't quite have that data yet. And then the line number 34 is emergency drill completion rate. And so Shannon, do you want to talk a little bit about that for everyone so they can better understand that?
So that is where, at this point in time, I think I took at the beginning of October, that is how many drills we've completed for the year. There are, I believe there are 7 drills that are usually required, or different types of drills. So that's a number that probably is right on target. I mean, most of the drills are done this time of year, but then they continue to go, be performed as the year goes on, so that number will just continue to move over. We anticipate that it'll be 100%, by I think the last scheduled drill might be in April, March or April, so we would anticipate that being, 100% by that point in time, so.
And how many have you done?
There's, right now we've done fire drills, intruder drills, tornado drills, and then we have an earthquake one coming up here in October.
And that's for each school?
Yeah, that's 32% across all the schools, K-12, K-12.
So that kind of makes sense. We'd be about a third of the way through those emergency drills. So we'll continue to monitor that, and Shannon's done a great job of kind of putting a new process in place there so that we know during the year. We don't wait to the end of the year to find out how that's going. So we really appreciated that. Then we go down to caring environment. Again, student Gallup poll. Extracurricular involvement, that's going to be another one that we look at through the lens of the Gallup poll. Quality teachers, line number 37, again, student Gallup poll. And then line number 38 is the percent of highly qualified staff that the St. Joe School District has. And that number has not been released by DESE yet. That gets uploaded every year, so it shows up on our report card on the Missouri Comprehensive School Data System. So Katie and I looked for that the other day, and it's still not there. We were at 58%. So compared to the other districts, we're kind of on the low end when we look at our comparison set. So we're hoping to see that maybe. The hope would be that would continue to improve.
And that's an overall of our staff, so paras, administrators, everything.
Well, it would be certificated staff,
Okay.
so not necessarily paras. So it would be those that, in particular, we would look at our classroom teachers in terms of highly qualified staff. And those that are in front of kids and what degrees have they gotten in those kind of things. That's how DESE looks at it. Then when we look at lines 39, 40, 41, 42, and 43, we're looking at employee engagement. So line number 39, that will be on our report card. So pending DESE, releasing that information, we'll have that. And we can also ask HR for that information, but we kind of like to wait to make sure that we get DESE's official number there before we report it. Good place to work, that is going to be on our Q12 Gallup employee engagement survey. So that is going to be deployed next week. So we've done the student Gallup poll. Now we look at our employees, and through the lens of 12 questions, that's why it's called the Q12, we can figure out where our staff is in terms of how engaged are they in their work. And so then we can look at that by each question, and it helps us better understand what areas we need to target to help to improve. An example, and I think I may have shared this in the past, one of the items that we were low on in the past was my opinion at work seems to matter. And so to support that, really trying to give people the opportunity to participate in surveys or focus groups and those kind of things. And not that their decision would, everybody would like their way, but that folks are heard. And so we've seen that go up a little bit as we've started this process, but I think also we're going to be doing more work with our building administrators on the question types and strategies that they can use to better engage their staff through the lens of those questions. So that's just a piece that we'll be looking at that when we get the results back as well. And then 41, that is another student Gallup poll. 42 is the employee engagement. So when we take the Q12 employee engagement, it gives you a percent. And so we've been at 34% of our employees engaged. We then went to 30% during last year during the pandemic, and Gallup said that that was pretty standard across the nation. But for our industry, which is education, 34% is pretty much the industry standard of employees that are truly engaged in their work. And then there's a population that they're working, they're in the boat. They're not, and then there's a certain population, I think our last was about 12%, that are actually rowing in the backwards direction. And so the focus is really on continuing to support those that are in the boat, not necessarily rowing, with the vigor that the others are, and to move them forward. And so that would be, again, information that we share with you. And the rowing the boat thing, sorry, but it's just kind of a metaphor. I probably mixed several in that particular explanation.
Couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
So last year, was this a question that was asked last year? Is this a good place to work? And was that survey put out this time last year?
Yes, and I can't remember exactly what the answer on that was. So I'd have to get back to you on that. And it'll go that's not on the student. That's not on the employee engagement. That is on the staff survey. Okay. And so I can get that metric for you as to what that was in the past.
Because I would love to see where we're at in comparison to where we were last year.
Yeah, and I can definitely provide that information when we get the new metric. So that one will go out next week too.
Yeah, because then that's going to tell us, one of the tests that I think we're going to be tested at is by the end of the year, do we retain more teachers and staff than we did last year?
Yes, yeah. And last year, I think that the turnover rate was about 20%, which outpaces our norm, which varies from like 12 to 15%. That being said, I think everyone knows that was called the Great Resignation is a real thing nationwide. So I think that was a contributing factor. So the hope is, that we would start to stabilize. And I also think, and Stacey's not here, but our new Teacher Institute and the support that we give our new teachers, we've been tracking that metric since we kind of reinvented that approach to our new Teacher Institute and the support that our new teachers get, because this year there was 100 new teachers hired. And that's not an excursion from pretty much every year. And so how are we retaining that group of teachers? Because that's where there's a lot of professional development and support that we really, Stacia and her team and all of academic services and really all of the teams together support those teachers. So we have seen that retention rate improve. And so she can, bring you that metric as well. But then there's other segments like of the workforce that we also have to look at, are we retaining, that we're losing to other school districts or folks are resigning, so.
Yeah, that would be one that I would be interested in looking at closely and following up.
Absolutely.
And that's just one that goes out, one survey that goes out around this time of year, or are there multiple surveys?
Really, we do one survey. We kind of have one survey. People will get survey fatigue after a while. But then if you couple that, like that survey with retention rate, plus your Q12 employee engagement, and then, enough anecdotal stories that there's a pattern, you can kind of get a read. And not just like a one-off story, but enough that, you know, you can kind of, with those metrics, kind of get a better feel for what that employee engagement level is. Because again, it goes right back up to that climate and culture
Yeah.
piece. So the two are pretty tied. So, yeah.
And that's the reason why I think it's so important, because while we say things like staff morale is high,
Mhm.
and camaraderie seems to be high, you know, do the surveys show that.
Right, and that's the thing. So it's that overall feeling, and then what do the metrics say? You know, and so how do you buffer that, all of that different information to get maybe a truer picture of, you know, what's really going on. So, yes, so once we get all these metrics in place, you can kind of put some of the pieces together to get a little bit more reality. Motivation's always high, you know, at the beginning of the year, but it's that discipline approach and engaged approach that really makes you stick through the rest of the year, because motivation often wanes. So yeah, we'll see different metrics come out during different times of year. Do you guys have any other questions about the balanced scorecard?
Yes, so I guess my next question is a follow-up question for what he asked, what David asked is, so you have said something about you're giving the administrators kind of a list of the questions they can ask in the survey?
No, so like if we're talking about the Q12, okay, so there's a list of 12 questions, and it's standard. Gallup develops those questions, they're tested,
Okay.
and then you get comparison data. So no, we would not develop that survey. But when they get the results back at the building level, then they can look at the answers on each of those 12 questions to better understand strengths and weaknesses. So maybe in their building, you know, the one item that I mentioned, you know, at work, my opinion seems to matter. Maybe that's high at their building, but maybe what's low is another question that people kind of laugh at is I have a best friend at work. Well, that kind of harkens to the relationships that you have at work. And so if that's low, how might that building administrator, you know, cultivate relationships between staff? You know, and so you kind of have strengths and weaknesses, and then you can really develop some strategies around and weaknesses, you know, we could also call them opportunities for improvement. So where might you go as a building? So it's kind of like having a little compass instead of just going, I don't know, people seem upset. You know, it gives you a little compass to how could I develop some targeted strategies for one or two items to help improve my employees' engagement. Sometimes even that there's a question that really asks, do you have what you need to do your job? Well, if you don't have what you need to do your job, you're not going to be engaged because you're going to be feeling pretty insecure 9 times out of 10 on doing your job. Whether it's a new teacher that doesn't have that support and has no idea, you know, how to do classroom management, and they may be able to be a great instructor, but if things are going wild with the kids, then they don't feel engaged in their work. And so those are things that we can look at as well. But then we get feedback all the time. For example, Stacia mentioned this morning in a meeting that some of the new teachers would like some support in terms of classroom management. So then they'll bring in professional development on that. So it's not just like a one-off thing. It's just we get feedback from a variety of things that helps us know how to support teachers. But those 12 questions help point you in the right direction.
So the administrators pick which ones are their strengths and weaknesses?
Well, Gallup will show you.
Okay, but
Yeah.
everything is turned into the district as a whole?
Yeah,
So
from
everybody-
Gallup. Yeah.
So there's kind of a database that we get on
Yep.
what question is kind of coming out as the lowest?
Yeah. They'll mark them kind of similar to this scorecard, red or yellow or green.
Could we see that?
Yeah. When that report comes back, well, I'd have to ask Dr. Egger, of course, but yeah. Yeah. So it's pretty straightforward report.
Okay.
So.
And for the teachers, you said we had 100 new staff. Now I know they were doing the professional development because I saw it on Facebook, it looked really good. So are they gonna continue that? Is that something that's gonna continue during the year, or was that just kind of?
They have
Yes.
monthly meetings.
Yes, so every month they meet at TMC, and that's all scheduled throughout the whole year to provide support.
And did they
Stacia
get
does
like
it
a
phenomenal.
survey or something after that?
Yep.
Okay.
She, actually, Stacia just shared that survey data back, and then she can utilize that to better understand what's going well and what they can continue to improve. Like, that's where they got some of the feedback that they need some help with classroom
Okay.
management.
And for the teachers that we already had, they also get professional development. Do they have surveys after?
Yep, every
Okay.
professional development, their surveys. Yep.
And then I did want to talk about the, is there, so I know we talked about Measure 14,
Uh-huh.
which is the math level, so seventh graders are at 480. which is,
Yes.
You know, at risk. Was there anything in the end of the year test results from 2021-2022 school year that predicted our kids having that lack of knowledge coming into the school year?
Well, this beginning of the year test, like right now, or at the end of the
The
year?
end of last.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there are, we always get a report on what areas that are potential strengths and weaknesses. And so for the seventh grade, if I'm recalling this right, and I'll double check this, numbers and operations were a strength, and we did see some improvement in algebraic thinking. I would say that geometry trends a little bit low. It's one of the last units that folks cover. Other than that, I think a gap would be, and we'll continue to focus on this, it's actually in one of our KPIs, is that algebraic thinking as a domain in math.
Well, I think what I was kind of wondering was for the sixth grade test scores from last year.
Oh,
Was
okay.
there anything that showed that our kids would be at risk of coming in without that lack of knowledge for seventh grade?
In terms of the sixth graders where they ended, they actually posted pretty strong results. So even though they're at a 480 right now, the thing of it is again, that what we're looking at is they're basically sixth graders. And so that 489 to 512 says that's where they should be for early on grade level. So they're just about there. So that 489 is red, but they're 9 points from being early on grade level for seventh grade. So it's actually, even though it's red, it's actually a more strong metric than one would suspect, because they could technically be a whole grade level below.
Right.
So since they're coming on, almost kissing early on grade level,
Okay.
then that is better than we would, potentially suspect.
Okay, I think my concern is, so we're at a 489, well, we're barely touching 489.
Yeah.
And then in December, we're gonna get the updated growth, or
Yes.
what we're gonna see for the middle of the school year.
Yeah.
Now, if that comes back and we're at a 489,
Uh-huh.
we would view it as a success. But that would mean that by the end of the year, they wouldn't be,
Right, no,
Right.
we would want to see some growth, because by middle of the year, that whole line that you're seeing, that 489 to 512, those numbers change. Because then we have to look at what are the proper scale scores for middle of the year. So then you'll see a different line of metrics there.
and they would go up.
Yes.
Would they be higher?
Yes.
Okay.
It keeps getting steeper as you go. Because the scale score might, like when you're starting out, might be a little lower, but then by middle of the year, you've got a whole nother range that you need to hit. And then by end of the year, you have a whole nother range that you need to hit.
So we only have the three times that we get kind of a percentage for. Now, let's say in December, we are just touching that risk factor again. Is there something that we can implement to help them by the end of the year? Because if we're looking at it as data,
Mhm.
and we're saying, okay, at the end of the year, they're going to be, a little higher, but they're still in that risk factor,
Mhm.
they would still have to go to the second, or to the next grade level. And then this is how we implement kids who are failing and they're not eligible to even continue in the 8th grade. And then, I just talked to some 5th grade teachers who were like, we're stressing out. A lot of kids don't know what they're doing. 5th grade is really hard, and we're scared that they're gonna fail.
Mhm.
Because either we have to keep implementing this work, but they're not understanding it. So, and I know this is a lot, but I'm just saying it's concerning.
Sure, and that's why we have Stacia and her team. We've got, Bethany and, Kara and Yellow, so providing, the whole team, Lara, providing that support. But really, if we see a particular school struggling through the lens of this data, and we just had some conversations the other day, Stacia and her team will specifically go into that school and get into those classrooms to help provide that support.
Okay.
So I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to that.
I'll just touch
Yeah.
on a couple things, but we also have interventionists, so in reading and math, and they help with those targeted skills that the kids need. And we also have Closing the Gap, the tutoring program, so a lot of our teachers are doing that after school, and I think that's huge for our kids, especially one-on-one help to get them caught up. So we do have some things in place to meet their needs. COVID was hard with learning loss. I mean, it is, and I think it's gonna take a while to recover from that.
So, you said Closing the Gap has been a big success,
I think so,
right?
yes.
Well, how many students are we reaching with that program? Because personally, my son is struggling with reading, and that's something that I contacted the school about.
Yep.
And it's not something that they're doing consistently with kids who are struggling. It's kind of if a parent goes and asks, this is something that I want done. So how many kids are we actually reaching with the Closing the Gap?
I don't have those numbers. I would have to look at every teacher's log sheets to know how many kids that would impact.
Okay.
I don't
That
have
would be
that.
great if you could get that.
Yeah, I can reach out to principals and see if they can reach out to teachers to get those numbers.
And has it just been, I don't want to say sporadic, but has it just been whenever teachers want to do it, or do they have to get
It's
on a
whenever,
schedule?
well, yes, it is when teachers can do it, because they have kids and schedules too. So some of them are doing it before school, some of them are doing it after school. But I can see if I can get you an estimate of numbers as far as kids that have been in that tutoring program so far.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank
Is
you.
that available to mentorship in this program that we're working on, getting into the schools and mentoring? Is that,
We have
Does
that
it pull
in
along?
pretty much every school in some
Yeah.
form, yeah.
because that's an extra load on the teacher again. If she feels that she's the one that's compelled to do all the extra work.
Yeah,
Wow.
and they were forced to do that, they signed up
Sure.
willingly to do that, so. But I would think every school should have someone that would be available for any kid who needed that
Right.
support.
But that's, it's just like him said, that's one teacher out of, the whole school, then she has to take the load on everyone who wants to be tutored.
Sure, there's more than one at every school.
Okay.
Mhm.
We just don't know how many.
There's about 300 if I remember correctly, we added some late. It's in between, I would say, 250, 300 teachers. And not just teachers, we have counselors doing that as well, we have speech and language people doing that, so.
Pull out during class time or
No,
before and after?
it's outside of contract hours, so they don't miss any of the daily instruction. It's just added support.
And the counselors do the tutoring, academic tutoring?
We have process consultants that have chosen to do it also, so I mean, it's really across the board.
Many of them are certified teachers before their current position, so they have that
Okay, they have the-
expertise.
okay,
Yeah.
that's it.
It would be, and not to be too divisive, but it would be interesting to see if there was some level of consistency in what each school is kind of doing.
We can, ideally, a parent could reach out to that building principal and say, my kid needs help with reading or math, and then that building principal should be finding the teacher in their building or another building to come over and provide that support. It doesn't even have to be a teacher in that building. Because like they said, we have process consultants who can also work with kids.
Yeah, and My concern is, so as a board member, I didn't know about this program. Even, my kids have been in school for a really long time and I didn't know about this program. And I'm pretty sure if you ask, some parents are gonna be like, we have no idea that they offer tutoring, that, because a lot of parents are concerned, but they can't afford the tutoring outside of, you know, the bills and everything that they have to pay. So how well are we doing of marketing and promoting the fact that we have this Close the Gap program? I mean, is it something
It's
that we
been
kind
marketed
of,
very well to our staff, but you're probably right, it probably hasn't been well
Parents.
communicated with our families.
And that
So
would-
that could be something we could have our communications
Yeah.
send out.
yeah, so maybe like at the
For
start of
sure.
the school year is we can give them a paper that says.
Even now,
Right.
probably be great, you know.
And generally, I'm just gonna speak from a building principal perspective, like generally the teachers are the ones that send that information out. So like if I have a second grade teacher that's tutoring, she sends out information to her class or invites, like she knows the kids that are really struggling and would invite them to tutoring. So that's just kind of how that has been done. The Close the Gap though is really just new this year. As
But
far as
it's
getting
not
that
kind of like across the district where everyone is kind of,
Well, they're not required to do it, so that's the
Right.
hard part, is that I can't just say, you're gonna be required to stay and tutor kids.
Right.
It's really dependent
Has to be
upon,
volunteer.
yeah.
and
yeah,
I don't
voluntary.
think that's, not what I was saying. What I was saying is, more so if they, as a school, if they could come together and say, this is something that we should tell our parents.
Yeah.
You know, even at PTA meetings or,
Right,
at the beginning of the open house is when they can leave a paper or something that just says, if you have a child that's struggling, we offer this.
Yes.
Obviously, it's going to be limited due to the teachers that we have that are,
Yeah.
you know, willing to do it, but if there is a spot, you know, maybe we can have like a waiting list or something.
well, we also used to have a district-wide list of people willing to take on more kids. That might be something we could try also,
Look at.
just
We,
thinking.
we do have a
Do we still
district
have it?
list, it's, there's just like one person on
Yeah, I
it
know.
though. It's a very small list of people
Yeah.
who are willing to take on kids. Cause we do have, we've had tutoring budgets built in, it's just been kind of a challenge to find people willing to stay before and after school. Close the Gap has been successful because it, you know, we've had a
Very
lot of people
compensated.
really like that,
Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah.
more compensation than what our tutoring budget was.
And
Right.
my understanding is teachers can go to other buildings to work in the program, so.
I can get with Eileen though and our building principals, just so we are communicating that message to our families. So, thank you for bringing that up.
And just one more thing.
No, you're fine.
So, I do know that we get like the data broken down and it's kind of, all of our kids crunched up together and we get that number. But I was wondering, would we be able to get a scorecard for our district that kind of shows where our schools are, each school? Because according to DESI, Pershing has really strong academic results. And I was wondering if that would show in our assessments as well. And that way we could look at each school and see which school is having more of a struggle than the other, and the ones who are having success, what are they doing? And how can we kind of view them as leaders to show us how to help the schools that are struggling?
Yeah, we have that information, so again, that would be a Dr. Edgar question, but they would have they have all the same metrics because that's, as a district level, which typically when we present to the board, it's just kind of at a district level, but if we wanted to see more at a school level, that would be something that we could do, but that would just be a question that we need to run past him. Okay, so the next piece that we have, and we'll go over this pretty quickly, I know where I'm gonna try to be respectful of time. This is the Students' Success Index. So this is this is part of MSIP 6. So while we have this overarching, balanced scorecard, this is really the stem to stern when we look at student success, where it starts all the way from pre-K all the way to when they leave us. What are the metrics, what's the fingerprint of metrics that DESI really is going to be looking at when we as a district get our accreditation and get a score on the student success index. And so, as you can imagine, we don't have all the metrics in yet. So, because we're just, just getting started. But we do have some, so I've highlighted some of those pieces. And so one of the first ones that we have is for our pre-K, and that is called our DRDP. And so we'll try to be brief and not get too far into the details, but Diallo can tell you what
You gave me that warning.
yeah,
Brief.
the DRDP and what that is, and who is given that particular assessment.
Okay, so DRDP stands for Desired Results Developmental Profile. So that's basically a acronym for that. And at the ELC, we have adopted the Project Construct, which is the Missouri model for our curriculum. However, they align to the Missouri aligns to the Missouri Early Learning Standards, which from DESE we are required to utilize. The DRDP is basically our tool that we track the students' progress, okay, on how we're doing with those Missouri Learning Standards. And so we, for the first time, I will say, to my knowledge, maybe they've done it before, I'm excited about this because we're going to track every student along the way using this tool to see where they started really in the first quarter, and then at the end of the year, third quarter, growth for that conference. So, and be able to see.
So this
Each individual student?
Yes, each individual student. So we also have our students with an IEP, so they have their individual goals. So we really had to come up with a way to, every student starts at a different spot. So it's not like a grade card where we're looking at, we want, proficiency like every 3, 4, and 5-year-old, where they're going to be. We want to show growth. So maybe one student comes in completely nonverbal. We're hoping that they move, along the line there. So if you started at a 2 in that area, we would hope to see through this intervention and through early education that they have now moved along, right? And so we're going to take all those numbers and total it, and that's where you get the 0.61.
So that's 61%. But this index is in terms of, like, you can see all the ones. So 1 is kind of the goal to get certain point values. It's kind of like a Monopoly game, sorry, but that's why you see 0.61 instead of like 61%.
Yeah, so we wouldn't expect, I guess I just want to preface, we would not expect our pre-K students to be at 100%.
Because it's the beginning of the year.
It's the beginning of the year. Well, and really, they're not even at the end. We're looking for growth.
Yeah, looking for growth.
Progress.
Okay, so the next one, and this is a new assessment. This comes from MSIP 6, and so I'll let Ms. Clark take this one.
So the KEA stands for the Kindergarten Entrance Assessment, and it is a new requirement from DESE under MSIP 6. And so DESE piloted what's called the Kindergarten Observation Form, which is what we adopted and trained our kindergarten teachers on. So we gave every kindergartner this observation form. There's some direct knowledge things that they have to have, like naming, letters, and counting, and then there's just things that they observe, like their social emotional development, their approaches to learning. And it gives us a readiness score in physical development, approaches to learning, social emotional development, cognitive and general knowledge, language and literacy, and then an overall, are they ready for kindergarten? And we found about 44% of our students are ready for kindergarten. That number was not super surprising given all the work that we have done with the Early Learning Center and acknowledging the value of that preschool and that early learning program. It just kind of gave us a baseline this year of where we're at and where we can go, and what we can do to help our kids come in ready to learn.
Okay.
So what do you do?
Okay.
You
Sorry.
got 44% of the kids who are ready, basically. And then, I'm sure there's some strategy on getting everyone up to speed.
Yeah, so that's when we bring in our interventionists. We do targeted skill groups with kindergartners. So we've been doing a lot of professional development on small groups so that we can fill in those skills that they don't have while not leaving the kids that are ready behind. And so it's pushing those kids that are ready, continuing to grow, and then filling in the skill gaps with the kids through intervention, whether that's in the classroom or pull out through an interventionist.
Okay, so one of the other pieces that really looks at if you're talking about being a successful student, having those successful outcomes in life, you got to show up. So it goes back to this attendance. So you can see that we've put over for every grade level where they were in terms of attendance. So, and we will start tracking our pre-K attendance, but that's a little more difficult given the structure. But we would like to see even our pre-K kids start that habit early. So you can see that, you know, we've got 79% in kindergarten, and we saw an uptick. And then we kind of saw the trend go back down in the high school, as I've mentioned. So we really don't want our ninth graders showing up, you know, at a rate that would cause concern, because every week that a ninth grader misses in school reduces their chances of graduation by 25%. So that is a concern. So we're continuing forward with that. We are, as I probably mentioned, maybe in the last attendance meeting, we're drilling down by the absent codes to find out the reasons why at each school. We're reviewing the plans in the buildings. We are looking at the number of hotline calls per building. We're looking at the number of teacher phone calls that have gone home per building in compliance with our protocol. So we're doing a lot of things to get at the root cause analysis and continue to improve, because that's what we would like to see. And we're also looking at the budget to expenditure index on each building's attendance plan. So if they've spent no money, the likelihood of that plan being deployed is not great. So those are conversations we'll have tomorrow as well in our K-12 meeting. A lot of these we're still waiting for numbers. Some of these numbers, like highlighted in orange, we really don't have a progress to graduation rate yet. Not a lot of kids have graduated at the beginning of the year. And we also, in terms of 8th graders making a plan for high school, we've just started the year. So we'll have updates on that. Let's see, what else do we have? A lot of this post-secondary readiness all the way through here. Those are things we're waiting on for DESE to update, and then we'll get some internal metrics on that as well. And then we also are looking, right now, we looked at a GPA of 2.5 or greater. Like right now, that's 53% of our kids. So at this moment in time, and again, that number can be a little bit wiggly because it's not the end of the quarter. So maybe all the grades haven't been updated and things like that. So at the end of the quarter, which is next week, then we would have a better metric, but that's what we have for you right now. It's just a snapshot in time. So we're looking at that. And then, so those are really the metrics that we have available at this point in time. By the middle of the year, we'll have more metrics so we can start to see where we are, because every grade level maxes out at a certain number of points. And so we'll be able to better understand where we are as for example, as we move down this column, if our seniors are meeting all of the metrics that would indicate that success-ready kids. So that's really where we are for right now. So that's that index. And then we got 2 minutes, so I'm going to talk extremely fast. This is on strategy. If you guys remember, we took all of our key performance indicators for our CSIP for our 4 goals. So if you remember, and we've gone over this, and this will be the big focus in November, as our CSIP. Again, we'll go back to that, but we've been talking about it quite a bit in these meetings. We have visionary leadership will guide SJSD's continuous improvement and innovation methods. Success-ready students. We just went over that whole list of things about success-ready students. The SJSD is a happy place to learn and work. You just saw some of the metrics that we'll be looking at on the ballot scorecard for that. And then regardless of background, all students are success ready. So that goes to equity and access. So we are continuing to monitor each one of these. While those are our 4 main goals, there's lots of stuff that goes underneath each one of those. So we update those. Different ones of us are goal champions on those, so that's how this gets updated. So right now, we're 35% on target. So some of our goals, we are now starting to be able to do because we have some actual metrics to update things and look at them with regard to our key performance indicators. So this just keeps us on target, and it keeps the CSIP from being a doorstop. So it's an active plan that's guiding the work, and then we have actual metrics that we look at to see how things are going. And sometimes they may not be going well, so what do we do about it? Or they may be going well, and that's good. So that is really all I have for you guys today, and it's 10 o'clock, so we met the mark. But I'm happy to take questions if you have any more. I know we've had quite a bit of good discussion, so, but always available, and I owe you, you had a question, so I'll get that number to you. It was you or David had a question. I think maybe both of you did. So I'll get those to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
You bet.